Okay, and thank you for everyone joining us and continuing to stay with us at EtherCon today. Currently, I'm your moderator, Erik Evjen, and this is going to be the funny side of RPGs. And our guest today is going to be Stan Brown. And Stan, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone here currently at EtherCon?
Hey everyone, it's John. I'm Stan, the guy with the exclamation point, and yeah, I've been in the gaming industry for a little while now. I've worked at uh, lots of different places, starting at West End Games and TSR, Wizards of the Coast, and Upper Deck Entertainment. I was one of the principals behind the Game Mechanics Incorporated, and now I'm one of the people that started it and am running Super Genius Games. So lots of freelance all over the place between that. So a lot of different things all over.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. So you do mention you did work at TSR. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
quite interested in that. Is there any, considering we are on the funny side here, was there any interesting experiences you had there? Any crazy fun tales for the audience?
Let's see. Safe for the internet. You know, everywhere I've worked, it's a very collegial and collegiate atmosphere at every game company I've worked at. So, you wind up with it's a lot like living in the dorms, except that you're making role playing games. So there's lots of funny things going on. Um, the Sometimes the funniest ones are only funny to the people who were there. But let me see. One of the funny things that happened to me shortly after I got to TSR, I moved out to Wisconsin, and a friend of mine from Chicago had helped me move in, and we took him uh, to the site just to. It was over the weekend, but we showed him around the building, and about 3 weeks later, I was on the phone with him in the office, just kind of talking about a project, and he's like, "It just struck me where you work. I can't believe it. You get to hang out with those guys every day." And I'm like, you were here. You saw the place. You saw it. I know, but now I hear you talking about all these people I know, and it was just the amount it kind of threw him was pretty funny. But as I say, funny for me. Um, I, you'd think I would have been prepared, knowing that this was the funny side of RPGs. I would have had lined up all my funny stories. That's why comedy is hard, folks.
Yeah, but I think
Uh,
we can figure our way through this one. Um, I suppose, was there any games you were running during that time, or any characters you might have had during playtesting, or any kind of just general RPG shenanigans at that time that might be worth remembering?
okay, here we go. I was working on the adventure for Heroes of Sorcery, which is a Dragonlance Fifth Age game, Fifth Age product, and same guy actually who was so uh, wowed at what was going on was helping to do the playtesting. He came up and in one of the one of the scenes, well, so they're tracking a bunch of Dark Knights. The group is tracking a bunch of Dark Knights, and everyone else except two of the characters go off to follow a lead. And this guy Sean's character happened to have the ability which allowed him to speak to animals. So he's at the camp with one other character, a dwarf who can't speak to animals, and Sean's character goes up and finds a squirrel and starts talking to the squirrel. And he asks the squirrel, "Hey, squirrel, did you see any Dark Knights, any humans in dark armor around here?" And the squirrel's like, "Yeah, I saw some. Do you have some nuts? I really need some nuts. I gotta get. Winter's coming." He says, "I have some nuts and I'll give them to you, but I need to ask you some questions first." The squirrel says, "Oh, okay," and he goes on. Every time he asks him a question, the squirrel would give him an answer and request some nuts. And eventually, the squirrel just stopped, and the Sean's character said, "Okay, I have some nuts for you. They're here in this bag." And he just pulls a bag off his hip, and I kind of stop and I say to Sean, you don't have any nuts in that. It's just a bag. He says, "Yes, I know. I want to get the squirrel to climb inside." And I figure he wants to keep the squirrel to use later, and I'm trying to give a hint to him that the squirrel's not going to be happy with you if there aren't any nuts, and you trap him in the bag, and he says, "I know, just let's get him in the bag." So he convinces the squirrel, there's nuts in this bag, and the squirrel says, "Oh, in the bag," and runs inside, and he scoops it up, and he says, "The squirrel's in the bag," and I said, "Yeah, the squirrel's in the bag." He said, "Yeah." And he just pounds the hell out of the table. Yeah! And the other guy who's there, first of all, everyone just falls out of their chairs laughing. The other guy who's playing the dwarf just looks at him and says, "The hell are you doing?" And he looks at the dwarf and says, "The squirrel was going to narc on us." and no one else knew. No one knew any different. And he was the only one that could talk to the squirrel. So everyone comes back and finds him washing out this sack of bloody squirrel bits and says, "What the hell happened?" And the dwarf says, "Oh, he totally saved us. A squirrel was going to narc on us."
Okay, that's one of the more interesting uses of speak to animals I've ever seen.
Yeah, I've never seen it matched. So you get funny things like that. I got to stay at TSR an extra couple of weeks longer than anyone else. After everyone moved out to Wizards, I had a wedding to go to, so I got the job of helping to clean out the TSR offices. They had when we had really big cubes. I mean, they were cubes, but they were like double, triple size cubes, and each one of us had one to ourselves. So we all had a big collection of the books we used most often, and a couple of different chairs, and it was pretty spacious for cube land. And but at Wizards we were told we had much smaller cubes and we're not going to have shelf space, so we had to leave behind a bunch of stuff. Only take what we absolutely needed, because there would be a games library where we could get any of the products we needed. We didn't have to all individually have every copy of everything. But that meant that people left behind just an amazing array of stuff. And so my job was to go around and just go through everyone's emptied cubes and see if I could find stuff that was worth keeping, just to make sure that they had all the stuff represented in the games library, that we weren't just throwing out valuable things. And I found just an incredible array of stuff. I was told that after I found 2 copies for the games library, I could keep for myself. And my game collection grew by leaps and bounds with some really awesome old stuff. A lot of it's still in original shrink wrap. So that was an interesting time. I found things like original Larry Elmore art just kind of left in a closet. And
oh, wow.
Just crazy things that got left behind. But the crazy, I thankfully did not find this, but I was going through someone else's cube, and all of a sudden I heard someone go, "Oh my God!" And so everyone came running over to see it. They'd taken apart the cubes, and because all the pieces had to go back to whoever they were renting it from. And someone's desk, they flipped it over, and on the underside of the desk was a gigantic patch of magic nose goblins.
Oh no!
So it had apparently been collecting for quite a long time. Yes, it was a grotesque scene, and we were all just kind of standing around, staring at it. And the guy whose job it was to move it around just didn't know what to do, and no one wanted to help him. So just lesson to everyone: be careful what you leave behind in your cube, because someone's going to find it.
Let's see.
See, I've stunned you with that one. Maybe I should have saved that for last. That's a biggie.
That's an interesting one, because I can't say I've ever really heard all that much about the transitional period between TSR and WotC there. So Always hearing those kinds of stories are interesting from you guys there that were able to experience it. I can't imagine how crazy it'd be to go and just randomly find some Larry Elmore work. Just
Yeah, that was really weird. I got some maps and some just kind of icon drawings um, from Dark Sun that no one had any use for, so I wound up being able to take those home. Larry Elmore, I didn't get to keep.
uh,
I probably should have just taken it out to the car, but
yeah.
honest, all that.
In the meantime, though, you did mention you're working at Super Genius Games now. Was that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders, and I'm the lead producer for Super Genius.
Okay, sounds good. Do you have any fun tales from this current period of time event?
Well, I mean, it's weird because we mostly are working in different cities, so we almost never get to see one another. It's it's often just a surprise when we talk. I know what's going on, but it's not like when I'm working in an office and I can go and check in on things or just kind of pick up and look at what's going on uh, when um, when stuff comes through. It's done already. But we exchange emails with typos and various other little things. It's the there's I wish I could remember exactly what this was. The funny things are when someone sees something and interprets it differently than other people, and I have to admit that often that's me. I just see things a little differently. So a piece of art will come through, and I'll be looking at it and going, "Is that guy wearing any pants?" And when you're working in an office, you can all stand around a desk and everyone goes, "Yes, pants, no pants, no, yes, oh look, that's clearly a hoo-ha over there," and things just kind of go more slowly, and so I wind up with longer time to determine in my head that clearly this guy has no pants on, and then they have to talk me out of it. So it's a slower, more deliberate process that can wear on a little. Um,
Okay.
kind of drawing a blank on actual funny genius stories. I'm sure that when Owen or Hiram see this, they'll go, "Why didn't you tell them about this?" And I'll say, "Because I totally blew it." Um, let's see. You got me now. I'm thinking of the TSR ones. So maybe it's about 15 minutes from now. The Super Genius ones will come. So
Okay.
going back to TSR, it's one of my favorite stories. So I get there, and let's say we all had big cubes, but the the quality of the facilities we had was not super. They didn't spend a lot of money on chairs and such. That they did for the conference rooms had mahogany tables and these wonderful chairs, but in Cubeland, when someone would leave, the first thing that happened the next morning is everyone would go into their cube and rate it for anything they wanted. Sometimes product, sometimes office supplies. But the real prize was chairs, because the chairs that we had at the in the cubes were just terrible. They were old and falling apart, and you were always looking to find a way to get a better chair. So whoever was the new person that came in got the absolute worst chairs that were left. So when I came in, I had a cube that had two chairs. One looked like a normal chair, but if you didn't sit in it just right, it would throw you onto the floor. And the other was something that used to be a chair, but now was just the flat bottom of the chair. So it was really more like a footrest. And in the end, I wound up choosing to sit on the footrest because I was tired of getting thrown on the floor. But at one point, we one of the editors, Cindy Rice, and I got given the assignment to go searching through all of the back closets of the office, because back in those days when they had the big TSR castle, every year at Gen Con, they would have dioramas built for the demos for each of the worlds, and there were 5 or 6 worlds. So each year they're building a different diorama to do a demo, one for Ravenloft, one for Planescape, one for Dark Sun, one for Core D&D, and they'd each have their own thing built at $250 to $500 or more a pop. And then the next year, someone would say, well, the one we used last year was good. We could do a different story with it. Let's get that. And no one could find them. No one knew what ever happened to them. They just disappeared. So Cindy and I had been given the assignment saying, look, we know that we packed them up last year and we know they exist. Find them. Look in every closet, every room, every door you can open, you can go in and look. And so we're going around and looking and just kind of coming up empty. There's nothing. We find, all kinds of other stuff, like the things I would later pull out of the closets after everyone else left. But nothing. And then we're pushing through this one area that's got like boxes of legal archives, and there's like a hanging row of a curtain, and we push past the curtain, and there, sitting in the center of this space, in a circle, almost like with light shining from heaven down onto it, is a circle of the most beautiful chairs you've ever seen. Still in plastic, just sitting there like some kind of chair henge. It was unbelievable. So we looked at this and we got very excited, and we ran off to Jim Ward, who was the head of creative services. He was the VP. And we ran off to his office, and we came in and we said, Jim. He said, did you find the dioramas? And we said, no, we didn't find the dioramas, Jim. We found chairs. And he said, I do not want chairs. I want the dioramas. We said, Jim, we need chairs. I'm sitting on a footrest. And he said, my chairs give me back pains. Can we have one of these chairs? The chairs are in plastic wrap. He says, no, sit down in these chairs here, and I will tell you why you cannot have those. So he sat down in Jim's office, and he says, those chairs are replacement chairs for the conference room, and they cost $2,000 apiece. And your little editorial behinds do not deserve $2,000 chairs. And we said, oh, well, Jim, your behind deserves $2,000 chair. We'll take yours. He said, no, that cannot happen. Those chairs are reserved for replacements. How long have we had chairs in the executive suite? Several years. Have any of them ever broken? No, none of them ever broken, and hopefully none of them will. But if they do, we have to have these chairs for replacements. You cannot have them. And so we had to go on with no chairs, and then the sale came, and Wizards bought TSR, and that means they bought everything that was there and was owned. And we got out to Seattle. Every once in a while, I'd be called into a meeting with someone higher up on the food chain than I was, and I'd walk in and I'd see him in this purple cloth and mahogany chair, and I'd know how much his behind was worth.
Oh, wow. And actually, I do have to echo a sentiment from the audience here. And actually, this kind of poses the question as well. How is anybody who is not royalty spend $2,000 for a chair?
Well, that's a good question, but that's also speaks something to how the upper management at TSR thought. There are a lot, and a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about Lorraine Williams. I don't, because she did a lot of very good things for the staff. She kept us all, or kept as many of us as she could, employed through 6 or 8 months where no products were being produced. There was no money being generated, and yet we all had a job and got paychecks and benefits the entire time, because she thought it was her responsibility to take care of the workers, and that's really something you don't see a lot. On the other hand, she did have a very very feudal way of looking at the world. And let's say that's one of the reasons why she took the responsibility for the workers as much as she did. And but she did see the world through very Tiffany rose-colored glasses, and she came from a family with money and ran the upper management. Thought of them as certainly a cut above the rest of the little folks who were little hobbits who were running around actually making the games.
Oh my. Okay. And I actually do have a couple of audience questions here that I was wanting to pose here. My first one is from David here in the chat. Have you ever run any RPG campaigns in the comedy genre, and how did they go, if you did?
Well, I ran Bureau 13, which is a TriTac game of investigative horror, which is a horror comedy kind of horror comedy kind of take on things. And it went well. I really think that most of the games that I've run have a strong comedy element to them. I think mainly because I like to set up ridiculous situations and just let people run with them, and give them the freedom to do that. In fact, every game I've ever played, no matter how serious you can look at the story is, and this may be true for everyone out there, or vast majority of people, there's just gaming is so much like improv that it tends to come up with humor. You tend to come up with the things that are entertaining and cause people to laugh. I find that the more that I try to be funny, I outright try to make things that are funny, the more I fail. It just kind of it doesn't live at the table the way it lives when I can create and control it the way I would if I were writing it as a story or drawing it as a comic. But when I think of it as a setup to punchline, if I think of myself as a DM as straight man, kind of lead up and give a situation that could be ridiculous and just push it up to the edge and let the players go with it, that's when the real comedy happens. And I think, if you look at, say, what happens with the Acquisitions Incorporated, the D&D game with the PvP and Penny Arcade folks, that the same thing happens. Chris Perkins, people will often say he runs a really hilarious game, but if you look at what he's doing, he's really just setting the table and, as a DM, leading it up and leaving the punchline for the players to deliver. And in that way, I would say that everything I've run has been comedy.
Excellent, excellent. Next question I do have is going to be coming from Richard. How hard do you find it to create a comedic gap in RPGs without relying on the real-life experiences of those at the table? In a way, players do kind of provide that punchline at the table, but this seems to be kind of an in-character question.
Yeah, well, a lot of it, once you know the group, it's very hard to do at the beginning. The characters, no matter how much you how well you define them at the beginning, they come to life over the course of a few episodes, a few game sessions, and what you can do is you see the behavior of the player, of the interactions that have caused some humor in the past, and you can play off the echoes of those. The more that you can find something that that resonates, then you can find ways to play with that. And that the minute you start bringing up something that has that kind of resonance, all the players around the table go, "Oh yeah," and they'll just kind of look at the guy, and you wind up with a situation where after the players have been established, kind of like you know your friends so well, you know what you can say to them that they'll latch onto. The characters take on enough of a life, hopefully, that you get to do the same thing. And it's a tough mix between there's humor at the table of the quoting Monty Python type, which it goes on all the time, and there's humor at the table which is referring to what has happened in the past in the campaign, but it's all building off something that's existing that everyone already has that they're bringing to the table. And it's the reason why when you tell these stories to people who weren't at your table, they're never quite that funny, or sometimes they just don't get it. Or when you have a new person who joins a group, then it's hard for them to kind of get in, or they don't get the jokes, or sometimes they don't get the seeds that you leave for them because they don't have the built-up experience that we use. At comedy is essentially built on breaking expectations in the same way that horror generally is you know what should happen in a situation, and comedy comes when the wrong thing happens.
Exactly. Okay. Next question I have.
Good questions, by the way, both of those.
Oh, definitely. And I got a few more coming in here. And generally my experiences have been the same way since the majority of times I've had at the table, either as a player or GM, to attempt to explain any of those stories to people without them kind of scratching their heads and giving me a cockeyed look, is generally rather hard.
It's weird. I mean, the harder you try to be funny, this has always been true for me. The harder you try to be funny, the more likely it is to fall flat, and the more you just kind of take something that comes and run with it, the more likely it is to actually catch that loose spirit of humor and have something that you can then leapfrog to the next one and keep going.
Exactly. And generally, for me, it's always seemed like just kind of the completely ironic situations have seemed to kind of resonate the most with players. Like, not to take up too much time here with my own stories, but one time I did have a dark elf NPC who, due to her backstory, was supposed to be a thief class, and she was apparently pretty good with knives and whatnot. Though by the time she was introduced until the time the story takes place, she had never scored a single hit or killed a single monster the entire campaign. So eventually, Karena and friends get to a little ballroom dance where the rest of the party is all dressed up and dancing, whatnot. One of the player characters walks up to her, and then she's kind of off to the side. And she's drinking some wine and just sitting there in like all normal like adventuring clothes. The player character poses the question, well, why aren't you dancing and whatnot? And then she simply replies, well, I'm only good at stabbing and killing things.
The other guy goes, no, you're not. Right?
Exactly. And I don't know, and generally, like, just like that, things never seem to translate that well, since at that point in the table, like, everyone just kind of fell to the ground dying from hysterics. But
right. I had a character most recently in Chris Perkins's Monday night game, which if you read he's got a column on the D&D website called the DM Experience, and he talks about what happens in his two campaigns. He actually wrote about this a couple of months ago. I had a character who was supposed to be an uber assassin, very similar to that. He was a dragonborn. He was a member of the military caste in this world, and he was like one of the top assassins in the assassin league. And I could not roll anything above an 8 in combat. It was just terrible. The guy every session would miss and then would get hit and fail a saving throw and fall unconscious. And same kind of thing happened, though he he died pretty ignobly off screen, and the player characters were used to. He would get knocked unconscious, and the guild would come and take him away, and then he'd show up later after they healed him and gave him some extra piece of information to help with the quests. But for all they knew, every time a fight would start out, he'd fall down, and then he'd get dragged to safety. So in the end, when he was off screen and died, and no one saw him come back, they thought, all right, he'll be back any day now. Because that's what always happened. But we just decided that I decided that was enough for him. He just couldn't. You know, it's weird. Right? There's the oddity of the game is how much the dice don't lie. Right? That character could not hit anything. It's just random numbers on a die, but anytime I was rolling to hit, it seemed like I rolled an 8 or lower. I got a new character. The very next week, I couldn't roll less than a 16. Just hitting everything. This guy was good. The other guy, he was bad.
Oh no, and the dice gods are always kind of just, I guess, judgmental on that. It seems the more interested you are in like crafting someone's specific backstory, the more the dice gods just want to come down and punish you for. No, you should decide that at the table.
Yeah, the dice can be really funny at times.
Yeah.
I think my dice really have a sense of humor.
Okay. So I had another question here coming from the audience. David asks, what is a... Actually, yes, a philosopher here, he says, what is a comedy element and how do you define it?
That's a tough question. So there's... when there are points when you're specifically trying to do something funny where you... again, kind of to build on the definition I was using earlier, where you set up everyone's expectations to the point where you know that at any point you're building up to the conclusion. You know the conclusion is going to come from left field. It's going to be the wrong thing, and that's comedy.
So you're basically setting up a punchline is what you're doing.
Yeah, to one extent. But
one of my games where I had a red bear and I didn't set him up as a punchline or anything, that's kind of like a kind of comedy element, but I didn't intend to have him comedic. He was just a red bear, and I had a PC was an intelligent beagle, but that was taken seriously that there were actually these characters here.
Right.
There's no punchline set up or no expectation for a punchline, so it actually worked. Yeah, it's a serious thing.
Yeah, and you can also have things where it's just denial, right? They want to get one thing, and you keep stringing them out. They get the wrong thing, or it's not quite what they wanted, and they've got to go somewhere else. And this can be handled seriously, or it can be handled comedically. It's all about the subtlety of touch and the attitude of the people at the table. And something that could be funny can just be frustrating if people are not in the mood for it.
So it's basically a twist then.
Yeah.
If you know.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. I do have another question from the audience. Which sort of comedy do you use? Ironic but plausible, satire, slapstick, ludicrous situations or things in situations, and any examples of what you might use the most?
I think that one of the keys to keeping things funny is to mix it up. You don't want to rely on the same thing all the time. I'm a funny voice guy, so that's invariably characters will have different voices, and the times that they're meant to be funny, they'll be weird or off-putting. As a player, I'm a non sequitur kind of guy, and I'm also an anachronism kind of guy. Just bring in perspectives from 21st century reality into the D&D world, and you've got comedy. But the key as a player is to make sure that even when it's funny, that you're not annoying people by derailing the game. There certainly are times when I either hold back or regret that I did not hold back, because I know that people are trying to get to a certain more serious emotional place, and I just see something funny there. So I would say that I make use of all the different things you described, but the pure just ridiculousness and anachronistic improprieties are the things I use most often.
Okay. Okay. I do have another, and this is actually kind of straying from the topic at hand, but I did get a question in regards to whether or not you had involvement with the TSR module Greyhawk Castle that came out during the late 80s.
No, I wasn't there at the time. I didn't join TSR until 1994 or 95. Though at West End Games, I was the lead editor for Paranoia. That certainly was comedy, though. While I was working on a few things, none of them ever wound up getting published. So very sad for me. I got to do some cartoons for the Paranoia, the 5th edition that came out, but that I don't know that I've actually gotten to work on any products that specifically were humor products. Though I always try to work in little bits of levity into the things I do work on. There's Dragonlance Bestiary that I wrote back in the mid 90s, where there's lots of little side stories. The conceit of the product is that this is an in-world book. It's a book about all the monsters and creatures you will find in the world from the perspective of an adventurer and a scholar writing the book together. And so there are lots of different stories that are the adventurer will tell about what happened, when he ran into a monster or when someone he knew ran into a monster, and they are specifically lighthearted, particularly for the ridiculous monsters, or tell tales about characters that are a little amusing for the ability to create the right sense of flavor. That while you're going to fight these things, some of them are a little ridiculous. And I guess others, they're in jokes, right? If you know what I'm writing, I was writing about a certain person that only people who know it will ever find out.
Indeed.
That's the weird bit of that's a very self-referential. It's for the in crowd kind of stuff that happens fairly often, and you've got to get people at conventions and buy them a few beers before they tell you the stories.
And you did mention you worked on Paranoia, was that correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And this might be one of those in-joke things, but I'm going to share it thanks to the Sandbaggers Game Club in Great Falls, Montana. That's treasonous. But I don't know.
All hail the computer!
All hail the computer, indeed. All right. So I got another question. This one comes from Richard Baisley. So are some of the things you rely on for humor related to gallows humor, kind of like the dark humor used on cop shows?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I mean, you get that a lot. You particularly in D&D, where death haunts you if the dice deem it so. You certainly when things look darkest is so often when you'll get people cracking the most jokes. And I think that's, as a DM, is a time when you really need to leave that to the players, because the more you seem to participate in it, the more it seems like you're mocking their bad luck or poor choices. Usually poor choices, but I think that's when you find the players really will step up and just start start cracking jokes. Sometimes in exasperation, and sometimes just because it's funny. I was cracking jokes all the time with my Dragonborn that couldn't hit anything, the assassin that couldn't hit anything, and yeah, of course I rolled a 2. Right? Woo! Look at that, slipped on some blood. But I think that particularly the dark humor is something that's probably best left for the players in most situations, unless, of course, it's the NPC who is doing so badly and is about to die. And the person that's on the hook is the one that should be allowed to set the level of humor in that kind of situation.
Exactly. And then I do have another question coming in. Gary Gygax used a lot of puns in his work. Have you done the same? Same question from Richard. He asked because they seem to be along the same lines as the in-jokes you mentioned previously.
Yes, well, there are people who like puns, and there are people who despise puns. But I love puns, but I try to go light on them because the people who don't get very, very unhappy with them. Off the top of my head, I guess I can't really think of any, but I know that they're in there. In the stuff I've written is full of stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. It reminds me of the sheet of terrible puns that I have at the game club where you can just tear them off. Okay. So it does seem we have about 8 minutes left. I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience via the Google Hangout or in the Oxen Mule chat room if they have any questions.
Well, I have one. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I do have. Well, you mentioned about leaving humor up to players. Sometimes, how can players bring good comedy in a game? For example, I once had a chaotic neutral bard in love with a paladin, and yet it never actually turned into anything comedic. You can see the potential there; it's just never actually developed.
Well, particularly when you're working with other people, it's a two-way street, and it's some people. I don't know if this is the case with the paladin or paladins are funny from the outside, but they've got to play it straight, and there's an art to being a straight man. A paladin character, pretty much by his or her nature, is a straight man or woman, and is not delivering the pun. So you need someone who's good at seeing the humor and leading up to it. And setting you up for the opportunity to bring it home. In the end, if someone doesn't want to participate in that, or more likely just isn't on the same wavelength as you are, the comedy is just not gonna come. The opportunities are gonna be there and kind of not get acted on.
So I think it was probably my problem because I had the chaotic neutral bard. I probably should have been, trying to set up these situations where he could have been a straight man, and I just had trouble thinking about how to do anything like that. And maybe the problem is that D&D is not really set up to do a Will and Grace situation. It's really hard to do Will and Grace and Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, Will and Grace, that kind of comedy is really hard because it requires not just it's good writing. Will and Grace is writing comedy, so it's not just an idea, but it's choosing the right phrasing in the early part of the scene so that you can build on it in the later part of the scene, and that kind of thing almost never comes through the first. I can tell you just as a writer, the first time you write it, it doesn't happen. You kind of lay it out, and then you see how everything's going to turn later on, and you can go back and refine your early dialogue so that it lays the seeds for later punchlines. So the kind of wordplay that you get from things like the Marx Brothers or comedy like Will and Grace is just really, really difficult to do well improvisationally. I'm not hearing anything. This is, I mean, that's kind of funny too, but sitting here hearing nothing.
I was going to ask the question of whether or not you think a GM should encourage humor regardless of the setting, or do you think it should happen organically and be dependent upon the situation and or the campaign?
I think it should definitely be dependent on the campaign, and it's dependent on the group of people at the table. Like I was saying, it doesn't matter what I'm playing. I see the funny side to it, but I know that there are groups that I play with that I just bite my tongue the entire time because I know that they don't want to do that. There will be certain things that have appeal to groups or individuals that they find more funny or have more fun with, and other things that they don't. So sometimes if you know the group well enough beforehand, you'll have an idea about that, but usually you'll just have to play it by ear.
I do find that oftentimes things that are intended to be really humorous, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Color of Magic, as they go on, they tend to get more and more serious and as you get more and more realistic. I don't know, it seems to be an evolution there. Has that been your experience in games too, that you would tend to start out funny and then it ends up becoming, okay, well, actually this is quite serious?
Well, I think that what you see there is the more that both of those examples, the really funny part at the beginning is so loose and non-specific. The story doesn't seem to be moving towards an actual resolution, and they're both kind of set up where the story, while what's happening in the beginning is funny, the ends that they're moving towards are, if not actually tragic, certainly serious. And as you go along, if you want to resolve the story, you've got to move away from the loose kind of anything can happen as long as it gets a laugh to we've got to reach our conclusion, and that just brings a more straight, if not and often somber.
So to work as a story, it has to start making sense, and you can't just keep twisting. Well, you could like Blazing Saddles. I mean, that thing just ends with a total twist, but I mean, not twist. That thing just ends, I guess.
Yes, and you see that. I mean, if you look at a lot of comedies, there are the ones that have tight stories that end. Often, you do just what you're talking about. Towards the end, they're not as funny as they were at the beginning or middle. It takes a very specific talent to write something that can be that funny, tell a whole story, and keep the level of humor all the way into the concluding scenes.
That's a very good insight there. That's something I hadn't realized before.
And you see the looser kind of screwball comedies, when they end, you don't all right, it's over, but you don't feel like you've gotten a conclusion that was being built to. You've just got to the point where it's done.
Could also be why when I start with something like Macho Woman with Guns or the Castle Greyhawk, before long, it starts actually become serious in my mind. I start taking this seriously, and it's like okay, now wait a second, how do we get Philberry's Dole Golems running around? There's somebody actually making Philberry's Dole Golems, and now he becomes part of the campaign, and now you've got.
Yes, well, and that kind of like Macho Women with Guns is a good example of the kind of thing that's really funny, but you better keep it short, because if you don't, then the comedy's gonna drain off for a while, and all you're gonna have is some really bizarre situation where the laughs are gone. Right? It's not that it's pretty close to a one-note joke, right? It's all of the supplements in the macho world, Macho Women with Guns, the Renegade Nuns on Wheels, they're a joke. Or at least a small grouping of jokes. And so you play with them for a while and they're done. Same thing with the Ghostbusters game. I've played a whole bunch of Ghostbusters, and the times it's been best is when you play something about the length of a convention game, like a 2 or 3, 4 hour game, and it's funny and it comes to an end, and at the end nothing, you've solved the problem kind of, but you're done for the evening. And then when you come back the next time, you don't have to worry about having the specific continuity of, well, what happened next. It's, okay, 3 weeks later in the office, this happened.
Well, I seem to see a lot of potential, like in Macho Women's Wisconsin, taking it into the serious direction. Say, well, wait a second, how is the society working? What's keeping it going? And maybe it becomes, figure out why they're able to keep this society going when, by all rights, it should have collapsed after 15 minutes.
Yeah, you could, but as you say, then the comedy is gone.
But you can still have little ironic twists and satire and stuff like there. I guess I was saying there are different types. You got the ironic, situations that you can always have, like in Star Trek. That's always funny, but it's never actually comedy. You always have, Spock and McCoy, and these situations come up that are kind of funny. Or Buffy, situations come up that are really kind of funny, but just as as opposed to like Spaceballs, which is like constantly funny, and then it just
right. No, yeah. So you're talking about moments of humor as opposed to comedy.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and I'm hoping that my microphone is working. Is anyone able to hear me currently?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, sounds good. Unfortunately, it is looking like we are running a couple of minutes over here, so I do believe we are going to have to finish the panel off. Stan, did you have any last words before you want to end the session here today?
I want to thank everyone for coming and participating. I had a lot of fun. There's a whole wide world of comedy that you can bring in, as we were just. I think the last bit was a good case in point. Right? Comedy can exist as the breadth of what you're doing, or it can punctuate it as little humorous moments. But there's always room for a little laugh in the game. So I'm here and doing plugs. The Super Genius Games. We've still got our products. We do a product a week to support Pathfinder. We're in the middle of our 52% off annual 52% off sale. Celebrate 52 products over the course of a year. And I myself have a Kickstarter going for a holiday Cthulhu mythos story, which that's comedy, right? Called The Littlest Shuggoth, and you can find that on my Twitter, which is StanX, or on Facebook. Find a link. But mostly, thank you for having me, and I had a very good time.
Indeed, I did too, and I gotta thank you, Stan. This was a great session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep, indeed.
Right.
Okay, and in just a few moments here, I'm going to have Bull Ratkavich and Jason Hardy for our last panel for this year's AetherCon, the Shadowrun question and answer panel. I will be seeing you all in just a few minutes here. Thank you.